Well, it's just straight up 10 o'clock. So let's go ahead and get started. Folks will be wandering in here during the first part of the presentation, I'm sure. But in the meantime, I want to honor every one of you who are on time. So my name is Kevin LaRue. I'm with SlickPic, and I'm joined by my colleague, Sam Burson, and of course, our guest of honor, Bob DiNatale. And so Bob's here to give us his unbiased opinions on the challenges for the month of April. You folks who have been participating in the 52-week challenge, good on you. It's always a great growth opportunity to get an assignment every week and submit your work for review as well. So we've invited photographer, author, teacher, and inventor Bob DiNatale to join us. I've known Bob for a number of years. He's an Adobe Certified Expert and a member of the X-Rite Coloratti. And something I didn't know about him before I started researching his bio, I didn't realize he presented his first digital media production in 1984.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going back a ways, man. I think I would just get started in my tech career back
A
then.
Windows 80, 86, Windows
Okay.
1.
I think I remember those. So you also founded the Olympus School of Digital Photography. That's pretty
Yeah.
impressive. That's
Yeah.
great. I know a number of people that shot Nikon, in the 90s and the early aughts here. Deb Sandage is obviously a Nikon ambassador, and Mike Corrado and I go way back. So really cool that you were involved in the Nikon
I
School of
did the
Photography.
Nikon school in the 70s and 80s.
Oh boy. Okay, so that's
And oh boy, that's
there.
when we came into town into the Holiday Inns. And,
Oh,
I did I want to say the Olympus School of Digital Photography in the mid 90s. And it
mm-hmm.
was really interesting because all it was doing was the same thing I did then. And the marketing director of Olympus at the time said, we were going to do a school before Nikon in the 70s, but you know what? We're, we're going to be the first ones to do a digital. So I walked into a waiting audience. He says,
There
I've
you
been waiting for this. I didn't have to sell it. He says, we're on. When can we start? So it's like
go.
doing what I did. And that's for everybody who's walking in. That was my transition. I was an early adopter, as you can tell by 1985. But my mantra was when I was teaching and doing all of this, I'd much rather teach a photographer a keyboard than a keyboard operator a camera in
Mm,
photography. It's
that's a
like,
great way to
if
put
you were a keyboard operator, do you know what gamma and shadow detail is and highlights,
it.
dynamic range? But you talk to a photographer, say, just hit the F6 key, it'll work. Trust me.
That's a
Yeah.
great way
So
to put it.
yeah.
Well, we're super excited to have you here, Bob. And for the audience, Bob's going to be reviewing again images that came out of our April 52-week challenge that SlickPic's hosting, and he's going to be focusing in on the following categories: black and white, macro, panorama, and architecture. And so there's a lot of fine-looking images in each one of those categories. And I'm really excited to welcome you, Bob. And we're expecting a lively and informative session.
But no
No
pressure.
pressure. Well, so hats off to you for taking the risk here and
taking
joining
taking
us.
the real 52-week challenge,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
the April challenge. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, thanks again, and the floor is all yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. Again, my name's Bob DiNatale. I'll go a little bit into the background. My website is www.bobdinatale.com. So you can access me there, and it's email at bobdinatale. And if there's any questions or whatever, drop it in the chat. And Kevin, I mean, you're right, Herd. Jump in when you think I need. I will try to take a break after each of the sections. This I'll try to keep it under 2.5 days. Uh, you guys send in so much wonderful. There's so many images and so many thoughts, but I want to go over my background, and I've been doing slide productions for years and saying, well, don't put too many words on the screen. Nobody reads them, you know? Well, this is just a quick synopsis. And you know, it's funny, you mentioned inventor, and I never thought about it until this patent attorney that I befriended doing Cibachrome way back when. I have a US patent in color printing. And he says, you know, you're an inventor, you know, you can put that on your card. And if you get an email from me, or I think there's a link that goes to the US Patent Office, it's all been digitized. It's really pretty bizarro. But my background has always been, you see Polaroid there. I was in the optical sensitizing dyes and worked in Polaroid and sensitized dyes, scraped emulsion off Kodachrome and put it in a centrifuge to see how they were sensitizing their silver halide. It was just bizarre. So, but my love was always photography, and it's going to affect what I do. And whatever I put up there for an impressive background or not, I don't, you know, these are some of the photographs. They're on SlickPic. And I think if you click on the link at my site, you'll get there. And it's nice to know a background of a teacher, you know, like I invented photography back in 1842. Let me see your pictures, because if you don't like their pictures. So I like to think I have some satisfying images. They look very colorful here when I look at them and stuff like that. But it's pretty interesting. My background has always been of a visual, but always been of that scientific and craft, and it's affected, you know, the way I've been. So it's going to influence my comments on your photography. So it's really an interesting thing. We digital photographers, and we've coined the phrase, I don't know, several years ago, the photographer processor, because we've got to take it off the card and put it in. And how did I get involved in this? I'm glad they came out with Lightroom or whether these softwares are, because I'm not getting into Photoshop. But the curse, the love, the bane, whatever it is of digital photography, we are photographer processors in some ways. You know, looking at your images, there's craft and creativity. The creativity is in your images. The craft, how you best optimize them, how you best show off your work, can be a challenge, especially with digital. So my basis is always this foundation and framework, not to be rigid, but to liberate into creativity. And what's important to know is there are three distinct processes. You know, you capture, you process your output. You capture on slide film, you capture on black and white film, but you need to convert that image in front of you into some sort of recording. And then you process that recording and then you output it. So we're talking about, and each one of these, matter of fact, each one of these are its own vocation. I mean, they're photographers. And there are people who work in labs and digital technicians. And there are photo labs that print. And one of the things we need to think about is when you look at output, and I'm going to mention some of this because your photographs that I reviewed and lots of thoughts on, I mean, terrific. I mean, capturing the scene, the observation, but we're outputting them not to print, or maybe print. Well, what are you doing? The print? Do you do it to the web? Yeah, if you post on SlickPic, you're doing it to the web. So these may be processed differently, but it doesn't affect the way we capture. We want to optimize the capture. We want to optimize our processing, and we want to optimize those. So the skinny of it is like we'd rather be creative, you know, and the craft and creativity, you know, together they are one. You know, I've talked about this for a while, and one of the people that attended my forum saying, have you heard the term shokunin? it's a Japanese word that the Shokin spirit is defined as the artisan who master their craft. So are they the craftsperson? Are they the artist? When you get to a level, you can't separate it because I'm guessing we all enter from the artisan. We see everybody sees a sunset, whether you're a photographer or not. They're beautiful, but you catch the beautiful dew on a flower that you submitted in the macro section. So it's really kind of an interesting, it's not all about the ones and zeros. It's certainly about your eye, but there is this blend of both. I have two books, and one's called The Optimum Digital Exposure, where I talk about how to achieve the optimum exposure. And then one's on processing the digital image. They're the first two elements in digital photography. And the books, and I'm just going to run quickly over the table of contents. You can take a look at this. The first thing, I talk about the 4 phases of processing, because once you capture the image, you're going to bring it into the camera, you do global adjustments, selective adjustments, and then, I need the sky bluer. I need the light on the eyes brighter. That's maybe the expressive part, maybe 10% of your photos. I think that logical process really helps us get to a creative end. And I talk about other fundamentals on the books. And I bring this up because the books on how to use Lightroom or Photoshop, it's really conceptual. If you look here, the photo fundamentals, the moment of capture, tonal relationships, and it doesn't matter what film, what digital camera you're using. Smart objects are kind of unique, but the advantages of those. And masking, not how just to mask, but the purpose of masking and the advantages of it, and maybe some tips and techniques. Other processing considerations, people don't think about frequency, but that's sharpening. When you use texture and when you sharpen, but you can use sharpen on the same picture, but get 2 different effects depending on the frequency of texture. So those are all mentioned in there. And non-destructive processing, I can't speak about that enough. Just a quick thought of trying to understand and work with non-destructive processing. It's important because the software is going to get better and you're going to get better. And you're going to say, oh, now I know what to do with the picture I took last April. I can adjust the shadows. So you can, I'll mention the books. I'll give you the link at the end. But what I want to talk about today is your photographs and this whole challenge and looking at what you submitted. And you people are engaged, and that's how you're going to get better. I know that. I've done, lots of talks in forums, the repeating people coming in, and someone will say, "Oh, Bob, I can't come to the April meeting. I'm going to be in I'm going to be shooting in Death Valley." And I said, "You're better off shooting in Death Valley than you are to come to a forum where I'm talking, because you're getting engaged, and it's pretty exciting to see how you guys are submitting this." So just the fact that you're submitting it, just the fact you're listening today, hey, we're all going to get better. However, during all of this, because I want to address some foundations, and I have some maybe supportive concepts if we have a chance to get to, but I don't want to minimize the importance of what makes a great photograph. Well, look at, there are components all over the place, right? You first with the subject, but there's lighting, there's composition, and then did you capture the moment? And then there's the beauty of it all. That's what we catch. Maybe the communication of it is it a new view? You know, why does the story come? I did some work for Hasselblad. They're based, in America. They were right here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And somebody had called them up and they asked if the company Hasselblad did they have a different view of the Earth other than the one that was coming from Apollo? You go, what other view would there be of Earth? But now we're looking for the new views or the new perspective. And I see some of your macro photography and your the architecture photography and the different perspectives. And so what makes it, because if you're missing this, I don't care how good your craft is, you're not going to get there. And then for those people who have seen Jay Meisel's work or his book, he talks about light, gesture, and color. And it's just an awareness. And like I say, I think your photographs that we're going to get to in about 10 seconds are have that. So we're going to look at those, and I'm going to base my comments on a lot of this foundation of photography. And Jay Meisel has this statement that says you're responsible for every part of your image, even the parts you're not interested in, like the bright light on the edge of the frame. Like I know there was a stop sign there, but I didn't have a chance to take it out. Well, then don't show me the picture. If you ever see him talk, he's just amazing if you ever have the opportunity. So we're responsible for all parts of the image. So these are the 4 topics we're going to cover today. And one other thing I would always ask is that, you know, when you take the picture, what is the intent? What you were aware enough to do it, but oh, I love the colors, I love the lines, I love the moment, because that's what you have to show to your viewer. So let's get started, and we will go back and forth. And I'm going to jump over here to SlickPic. I'm going to click on architecture, and we'll start with this one. I'm going to just scan down some of these very exciting images you have here. And well, architecture is pretty interesting because we're dealing with lines. And if I go to something like this, when did the lines converge? And is it a hindrance to the viewer, or is it assisting the viewer? Again, we travel, we see these wonderful sites, and you take this, well, the only way you're going to take it is because you're in close, you're going to tilt up. So sometimes it creates dynamic lines. And sometimes it's, you know, kind of distorted. It's hard when you go into Notre Dame and it's just so majestic. It's hard to straighten everything out, you know. And I want to just talk a little bit about the craft of that goes into it. You know, when you take architecture, one of the biggest things is distortion. Why is it distorted? Well, the film plane, remember film, your sensor is not parallel with the subject. The solution is to keep your camera parallel. Okay, to hold it, to do it with a tripod and levels. I mean, the challenges we had years ago, they had view cameras. They would try to twist the camera so the film, the back of the camera was parallel, and they would twist it left to right to make sure it lined up. And then Nikon was the first one I saw with a PC lens, perspective control. And then this is a Canon lens. So without needing these view cameras with all these tilts and swings. Today, it's all software. ACR is Adobe Camera Raw, but they have these transform kind of things where you draw grid lines. And when you draw the grid lines, the software just squares everything up. So the challenge for you as the photographer is to question, be aware, and what is your intent? When you look up at this statue, when you look up at these skyscrapers, it's so dynamic with the parallel lines. Okay, then they work. How about if you're trying to do some documentation? So we have these tools aware to us. They're even in our iPhone. So the choice is yours. And let's take, I'm going to go through some of these, and I have comments on some of them if I go through yours. So here is a situation that, again, these are parallax problems. So whether you're documenting on a trip, maybe you want to come back and just say, square this up. It's very easy. Just draw the parallel lines and it snaps in. Here is kind of like just a classic, architecture shot. Everything's nice, everything's square, there's good exposure. So going back to that Venn diagram, that what makes up a good photograph, well, some of those components, all of those components, but now we're dealing with architecture. And when do we get a building like this that is almost straight? And I think we want to be aware, and it falls into the category of architecture. And this is probably tilted back a little, that may be easily fixed with either your software or a little awareness. And sometimes when you shoot these, you may shoot wider than normal and you'll straighten them up later. But again, this is the photographer processor that we all, this is a wonderful photograph because it's clean, it's easy to look at, it's nice and square. Maybe the left-hand cabinetry over here is a little tilted, but it's fine. It's just wonderful. And we want to be aware of, balancing exposure too. We have a bright sky. We have, a bright ceiling here. Maybe the foreground, if the foreground was a little darker, or with a vignette, I'm maybe saying not even a vignette on the whole thing, maybe just a vignette in the bottom to help the viewer's eye. But this is a very nice exposure. And sometimes with architecture, well, I think I'll save it for the end. Well, I have another image when I talk about lighting. But again, here, this is interesting. So do you straighten it out? Do you not straighten it out? Well, the wonderful thing about digital photography is if you missed it when you were taking it, you can probably do something about it in the back end. So, but here, this is up to the photographer, obviously, it's subjective, but I mean, if you feel like when you look at this, like I have to look up in these converging columns, I mean, you feel the sense of scale. All right, then leave them. If you're trying to document it, then if you get your camera, the sensor parallel to the wall, you're going to miss the ceiling. So that doesn't work. Maybe go really wide and square it up and then crop it out, or bring it back to your software. But when you submit it and you post it on your SlickPic website, people are going to see your work. And long ago, when I was doing the Nikon school, my partner had a great, he says, a photographer is known by what They show, not what they shoot. We all take hundreds of pictures, and we should not be showing hundreds of pictures. We probably should be showing 5 pictures. So take a look at this, and I want you to be aware, because look at the foreground. It's acceptable, but how easy is it to put a gradient to lighten up the darker details? Can anybody tell I'm from Boston with the darker details? With the darker details, maybe a gradient balances it with the brightness of the ceiling. Now think about what we are as photographers. I know it's tilted. I'll take care of that. I know it's brighter up the top than it is in the bottom of the scene. I'll take care of that. So we're traveling, we're documenting it. And when I talk about the 4 phases, when we capture, you can't, the 4 processing phases, you can't process unless you capture. But when you capture, you bring that card, you bring the data into your computer. A lot of things happen there. But then you make your global adjustments, then you make your selective adjustments. Here would be maybe the bottom half of your screen. And then the expressive would be, please, I have so many pictures on my trip. You know, there's 7 I want to spend time with. Okay, so you're not going to do, you know, the expressive for them all, but you really want to be aware of that, you know, and taking a look at this. So if we want to say architecturally, it's square, it's nice. And we're talking about parallel lines, not bows from very wide angle lenses, although that's taken care of in your software too. I don't want to make the assumption, Kevin, I'm not sure if we have a profile on the people and how many people use Lightroom or use Capture One or, you know, On One, but they all have these features to take out distortion. Many of them have the ability to identify the lens and take out any lens distortion, and need to be aware of that. This is a very nice picture here. Now, this is kind of interesting picture to me. It's like, I don't know, this lack of parallel lines here almost works for me in this one. And so what should you do with it? Well, whatever you want to do with it. For me, it kind of works because of this tall building in the background. Now, one could question whether the wonderful foreground, the columns, the lines, is this, I saw that this might have been even in the leading lines category, but I'm not sure if I'd almost like to be peering through them, and they're so defined. Well, I don't know how many people are dealing with Lightroom or have explored the new lens blur. You can control post photo the degree of softness to these columns and lines. So if you try that, because you can, and it's easy, and it's also easy to say, no, I liked it originally, but explore those, because you may be surprised. I would love to see, and I did take a couple of your images and brought them into Lightroom, and maybe I'll demonstrate some of those and make sure. But try those things. I don't think I changed the parallel lines here, the parallax distortion. I think maybe the lines in front here are a little hard for me, but again. Now, I don't know what parallel lines are horizontal, in all the parallax corrections. I wouldn't touch this one because of the dynamics of helping the viewer go right down, you know, this pool. It's wonderful. So being mindful, that's the word, it's probably overused, but being aware. I don't know if mindful is overused, but being aware, I kind of think of being aware as part of the kit bag of a photographer. That's why we stop and trip the shutter, because we're aware of it. So here it's like every rule. I mean, the rules are guides for you to ponder and accept, use, or reject. It doesn't much matter. But I love this one. Very, very nice. The lines are pretty good. They could be straighter, but it doesn't get in the way. Looking back at that big picture, and when I say the Venn diagram, those are the two circles in the subject. I'm going to use that keyword to hopefully evoke the creative aspect, or what makes a good picture. Now, I would ask you here, this looks a little heavy to me, and on the exposure, it was either in the exposure or the process, but I think this could be lighter, although the dark, dramatic contrast of the very dark building. But again, this looks heavy to me, and I remember the three elements of any optical system is to capture, to process, and to output. Here is an interesting challenge, because when you output, what are you outputting to? Because if you output to SlickPic, to the web, this heavy kind of thing, I say, yeah, it was an overcast day in Boston. I think I looked to see it, but with the brick buildings, okay, you're going to send in the composition to a competition. This may be a challenge to print. So that whole aspect of, again, if I took a quick snapshot of all the 4 different sections I looked at prior to doing this, I don't think there's a problem with the creative eye of the photographers who sent in their work. But now, as the communicators, because you saw this and it may intrigue you and it may stick in your mind. You don't have to photograph this or make a print of this unless you want to share it. Now you have to think of the viewer. So all of those elements go in. This is just absolutely exciting. Exciting in a lot of ways. I mean, there were no kind of parallel lines if you want to look in the back of the rows of windows. But sometimes lighting plays a big part in your architectural photography, especially if you're doing it when you're documenting. An architect says, you got to go see my building. I want the upstairs. I want the downstairs. I mean, I've photographed bathrooms that are just with marble and glass and neon colored lights. So, you have to document that as best you can to represent the architect's work. That's documentation. Here, it's more expression. However, we can certainly use the architectural lighting, because sometimes to light some of these large areas, and when we go to this, take a scene like this, I mean, the lighting is there for us. And when do we change the lighting? When do we don't change the lighting? Obviously, late in the day, the cross between night and the end of the day, we have some wonderful, wonderful lighting. And of course, these lightings have their own color. So I can see by, I don't know, sodium vapor lights, mercury lights. It's wonderful. I look at this and I'm wrestling with the lines in the bottom right here. If I was doing this, I don't know, but it's so easy to grab just the rooftop here with the white lines and then increase the contrast, or raise the shadows, maybe move the highlights. And can I bring this into play with the city? But it's so easy to do this, the familiarity you need to, you should have in your kit bag. And I can't tell you how many times I'll do this and say, it was better the other way. Well, I gave it a 2-minute look. And again, just to put a quick brush over that and lighten the shadows and increase the contrast a little and say, this is worthy for a little more time or not, totally yours.
Hey, Bob, if I could just jump in for a second.
Please, anytime.
You were talking about that kind of selective adjustment down there. Do you ever make process a photo to your satisfaction at that time, and then come back after a certain time period and take a fresh look at it? And or are you making these creative decisions? And like you said, it'd take me a minute to brush that, and then you decide on the spot whether you like A or B. But do you ever sit on a photo for a while and then come back and dramatically?
Oh, absolutely. It's a great question. I think in the book on I'm pretty sure it's in the processing the digital in the optimum digital exposure. I talk about editing, because where do you go into your photo review? I mean, the first thing you do is you review them. I think there's a first, second, and third review, Kevin, and it's part of my lectures. And I have this funnel. The first review, just go through it fast. Now, is this the best one? No, and I use Lightroom, so I'll put flag, and be liberal. Then those are the picks. Then I do the picks of picks, and I'll just look at those. And then I'll say, look, I'm just got rid of all the clutter. Let me look at these 28 out of 100, because we can do the percentages easy. So you do 100 photographs, you get 28 that are flagged, and you look at the 28 and you go, I'll give this 3 stars. I'll give this 2 stars. And to me, those are the keepers. That's level 2. I think those 2 steps should be done as close to the shoot as possible. When you come back and you've got, you load your vacation and then you got 400, 800, 1,000 photos. Well, then segment them off by the day or whatever it is and go through them and say, oh, this is good, because you'll remember. Oh, I remember here. Look at this picture we're looking at here. The building is sagging. And I remember the 2 next to it were standing straight and tall. So you start remembering your experience, and then you pick those. And then the third one is, the first one is picks. The picks are the picks. I call them keepers, because I'll get rid of all the other ones. And then there's the selects. And I say, you want to put some time between steps 2 and step 3, addressing exactly what you're saying. Just walk away from it. Doesn't mean when I do the picks, I do the flags, and then I'll say, hey, which one of these are good? And maybe I'll straighten this out. Let me try a little brush in the low. Well, this is worthy. I'm going to put 2 stars on this, right? Then I'll go back later and say, oh, yes. So I think this important. I think it's almost, Kevin, like it's the 4th step. It's like, put some time between step 2 and step 3. So the first review, you're just going to your picks. Then when you start culling through those to me would be your keepers, because anything above that I'm getting rid of. And then go away and come back and pick the selects. I think that's,
I do like that strategy. Culling is one of my kryptonite. So I'm always looking for recommendations. And I think your Venn diagram was very helpful. I actually took a screenshot of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start to apply.
I wish I could say I thought that up. I was reading an article and saying, well, how do we look at a photograph? But anything that could stimulate or make us focus. I have a book called The Image Non-Image. I'm some a little Zenish, not so much technical, but I started the beginning with the words ponder. It was just ponder in big size. down to the left was medium size and lighter, and down to the lower left was smaller and almost transparent, because it's ponder, ponder, ponder. And that's that editing. It's a difficult thing. That's why it depends on who you are. Sometimes some people just like to get rid of everything that isn't flagged. And quite honestly, you have 1,000 shots, you're going to get rid of 650 of them. But then don't delete them all. But it's so easy to sort them in the flags because it is the kryptonite, you know? And the kryptonite because you're spending time in the wrong places. Now let's just get to the creative part. This is very interesting. I don't know the aspect of this, and I only posed the question, and I hope you question your photographs. If you can question them in the camera, then do it. I can tell you for sure, take it to the bank. The final exposure is not in your camera. The final exposure is in your software. The optimum exposure is not the final exposure. Now, the composition is something else. Although with generative fill, who the hell knows, we could extend this building any way we want. But then there is what you can fix or what you can be aware of. Now, here, we're talking about architecture. And I posed the question, if you could, we know how we can get the lines of this building to be parallel and stand up straight. You might not have had room to do it, but we can do it later. And if they were, would the curvature be more accentuated, the sagging of this bottom floor? So if you can be aware of it, it's great. Shoot it. I mean, I've shot pictures. I remember in Tuscany, and we rented this van and this stone hay storage, and my two photographer friends drove the van, and they're taking pictures of this and saying, get the van out of the way, get the van out of the way. I could move a little to the left. I can take it out in Photoshop, you know, because I'm aware of that then, and I'll come back. I think I feel going through this, what I'm saying here, we'll probably pick up the speed when we go through the other sections, because it all goes back to that Venn diagram. You know, be aware of it and then make your choice as the photographer, you know. And again, we have photographer processes now because of the digital world. You know, this one here, I don't know. This one I think needs to be standing straight up to me, you know, and easy enough to do it. You know, this, look at the vertical lines here. The vertical lines are just fine. If they're a little distorted, it doesn't matter. You get the feel. It's not. But sometimes if the horizontal is off, that's almost harder to accept. Now I can see the lighting fixture on the middle left, you know, on the left edge here. So it's distorted, probably because of the wide angle of the lens. The viewer gets that, feels that. But if the fireplace is a little crooked, that seems more offensive to the viewer than if it's standing up straight. It's wonderful. It's just, you know, again, this is just wonderful. Sometimes when I see this, I don't know if as a photographer, I feel like, am I stealing someone else's design? It's beautiful, right? I feel like sometimes I'm a recorder. That doesn't make it bad, because here is where the blue sky with the yellow orange lighting, it's just so many good things working here. Again, I looked at these things. This is, I think, the Bellagio Hotel. Again, take a look at the columns. They're tilted a little, but doesn't get in the way here. Matter of fact, it adds to it. And of course, the designer, not the lighting designer, but the floor designer, what a crazy pattern that is on the floor. It's wonderful. Just nicely done. Nice documentary. I want to mention something about framing and aspect ratio of your picture. You know, whether it's 35 millimeter or 3x4, 4x5, or 8x10, or, oh God, we can use the crop tool and we can make a 4x7 and 9/8. Like, what the hell? What do we, but it makes the composition. I try to get at least some, it's just me. I want to make sure I'm in some kind of standard format in case it goes to a print, in case I do a show. Now, if I go here and I go here, of course, we have different sizes here. But sometimes when you hang an 8x10 beside an 8x7 and 14/17, it's like there's no unity to the hanging. So I'm always sensitive to that. And I love square compositions. Matter of fact, on my site, my SlickPic site, I have a link called Squares. And the square composition, this could be a square composition very easily. And boy, I think you get the right subject on a square composition. It's almost like there's no place to hide, and it stands out very well. This is really interesting. This is, I guess, architecture, but we all understand about perspective, right? Perspective, this is compressed. You can see the rooftops, the ship, and the mountain behind. And some people think lenses compress because telephoto lenses compress. No, it's the distance you are from the subject that compresses. And then the telephoto is just a narrower angle of view. Matter of fact, I have a class, maybe an interesting one to think of, Kevin and Sam. I get about a 40-minute presentation on perspective, because perspective is controlled by your feet. You stand on a road and you see all those telephone poles, and the ones way down the end are very small. Yeah. Doesn't matter if you take a picture of it or not. You walk up close to the first one, the second one gets further away. So that's what we do as photographers. We walk in, we go up, down, left, right, make sure the pole isn't in the person's head. But what if you step in 25 feet? It pushes the background back. What if you back up? What if you back up much further than you would think would be, but then you use your telephoto or the zoom part of your lens? You've changed the perspective. And by the way, if you walk back to compress it because it's all done with your feet, you don't have to take a picture at all. It has nothing to do with your camera. So this is kind of exciting because it makes the lines, well, there's certainly no lines in the back because it's a mountain and natural, but it really kind of sets it off. So it's an interesting perspective shot. I don't know. I have a note here that says almost. This is almost straight. What is the intent? Remember I said intent, because if you think of the Venn diagram, then what is the intent? Why am I taking this? It was so majestic. It was so tall. It was so neat and classical. Well, neat and classical means I'll straighten back up and, Lightroom or whatever it may be. So all the things that you're challenged with.
That's fun.
Yeah, that's a nice one. Yeah. It's interesting how much you raise the shadow detail or not. No, I think the shadow of the little people look great here.
Silhouette,
yeah. Now this is a kind of interesting one. Just this is the lighting, the nice time of day, the lighting on the building. Not sure what I think of the left-hand side of this, because it's not like the building is reaching out. If it was a boat, a car, train, you give it room to move out. This is not a moving. So do you look at this and just think of this as a square composition? Would it work? How easy is that to try in your software? And then it may show off the building even more. Just a nice, fun photograph, a good observation. And I have a note here. It says, what was the intent? Well, if you think of all the soft curved lines, and if you straighten the arch up, would it help emphasize the mannequins more? And if it did, would the mannequins be helped with a little masking with Lightroom or this AI masking? You know how easy it is to grab the mannequins with the object tool or so many tools. And then you punch, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think you're right when there's a lot, I think there's a next level of creativity. The capture is interesting, but to me, my post-processing mind is whirling right now about how to make those mannequins.
Yes. And it's not a bad thing that the post-processing is a real element. Post-processing, pre-visualization. Did anybody hear that term before?
Oh, yeah.
Ansel Adams, pre-visualized. You know why he pre-visualized? Because he couldn't post-visualize. I think digital is post-visualization.
Yeah, for sure.
And my job as a photographer, I must have been at judging an event, I don't know, 15 years ago. And up comes the next picture or next entry, and the person moderating it would say, the maker of this photograph. I was offended. Maker? The maker of this photograph? What happened? I thought it was a photographer. Right? They bring up the makers. But now I think myself, we talk about capture, and capture is important. Capture is the first step, and capture is certainly the result of creativity. I mean, you got to see this. So if you don't see it, but capturing it, and if you say, oh, now I just caught my eye, now that I'm sitting back doing my first review, I say, you know how easy it is for me? You see the space on the left-hand side of this arch? I can put the same space on the right-hand side. Now there's symmetry. Now I stand it up. Now there's symmetry.
Okay.
And now I'm going to go and clean off. I'm going to grab those mannequins. And if I can mask it and just put the exposure up a little bit, I can take the saturation down so they almost become pure white.
That's right. That's exactly what
And there you go. And so are you a good photographer? And look at, I produce visuals. What can I say?
You're a maker.
Yeah, a maker. I know. How about this? Oh, yes, I'm okay. I'm a maker. Okay.
You got PTSD over that.
I'm a processor photographer.
There you go. Hey, Bob, I do want to be mindful of the time and the fact
Sure.
we have 3 other categories to get to.
Okay, so I'm not going to go through.
I love the comments. It's all good.
I know. So take a look at this squareness here, and I think one of the things I'm hopping on now, and I might have mentioned it, or one hopping on like the Venn diagram and the sensitivity to it, is like, I think I may go through the other sections faster because this is the basis that we all should look at all of our photos that way. Okay, so if we're doing macro, just because it's a new view, does it not have to be in focus? So I'll probably shorten those up. I'll try to keep aware of that. Thank you, Kevin.
Wow.
This is exciting. Just exciting. Here, you don't want to touch the lines of this. This is great. I'm going, again, is this a square photograph, a little office square? Can you help this left building? We know what we're looking at in San Francisco. If this left-hand building, if we just could make it a little brighter, how does it help? But those are the kind of things that become really easy. This you don't want to straighten out at all, but what do you do with this aspect ratio? So when I talk about aspect ratio here, and do we crop the top? Do we lose the effect? Again, I'm going to move faster through the other subjects because I'll bring up kind of the same topics. Let me show you something here. take a look at this one. That's the one we just looked at versus this.
Ah.
Now look what I did here. This was the original, and I cropped it. Then I took that aspect ratio, and I think I probably went in and squeezed it a little. Then I twisted it a little. Then I went into Photoshop and said, generative fill, give me the rest of this, you know? But take a look at the difference between this one here from its original.
Mm-hmm.
So it is the capture, but it doesn't mean you didn't see this. You saw it, but it was like, let me move ahead here. It's very
Cool.
nice.
No,
Yeah, this needs to be straightened. You know, the only problem I have with this is like, there's no black. It doesn't have a bottom to this picture. Use your black point. You know, the fact that you caught a nice scene and did a nice architectural photograph. I think this very simply, if you take this center line right in the crease here and you square it up, I think those lines, I think, would have a lot more to it. Oh, this is just magic. This is just magic. Sometimes you take what you're given. Yeah, it's good observation, great observation. See, again, this is exciting. Well, look at the space up the top. Do you want the space? All I can say here, the biggest thing to me is just give it some contrast and saturation. It's a great subject matter, but there's not a punch here. Okay, enough said here. This is one. If you could straighten up these lines, I want to say why, because there's so much dynamics going on to here. Maybe a horizontal. Get the horizon line a little straighter. Oh, this is terrific because there's no straight lines. If the photographer wanted to say, look at those triangle roofs, I would just question whether I want to take the blue cast out of all of this and take those roofs and make them a little warm. It would really make them jump out if that's what you saw. Oh, this is just wonderful. Yeah, it's just a terrific photograph. Here is the classic where sometimes I'll say, how was the lighting? Boy, I'm relying on the architecture, the lighting. This is great lighting that they did. You know, we don't want to put the horizon line across the middle because it looks unbalanced if you put a horizon line. I mean, it just looks, you're not looking at the top. This diagonal going from bottom left to top right, I just wonder if a different kind of crop, a different kind of twist would not fill the two elements 50-50. It's wonderful, wonderful picture. I think this is the last one I'm going to show here. But look at this. This is wonderful. I don't care about the lines here, the parallel lines, or the curvature up the top. I think I just did a grab here because look at this. And look at what auto brightness does. And look at what saturation does. You saw it, you captured it. But there was, you know, just think you're not done.
Just needed a little pop.
But you know what, Kevin, when we get there, we say, oh, we were in Prague, in one synagogue in Prague. I have a photo similar to this. It was like, we captured it. We were in awe by it. Yeah, but you're still the photographer and you want to share it with somebody. Look at the saturation. Is that what you felt around your vibrance? Yeah. Okay, let's go to the panoramas and at all times with the panoramas or with anything, just don't forget those principles here. Let's go here, and I'm going to hit escape. I should be able to go to panoramas. On panoramas, come on. Where are you? Oh, slow internet. You know, the panoramas themselves can be exciting. But you can't live on panoramas alone. I mean, we still want to get exposure and some really, so the panoramas themselves, however they get taken, and certainly I noticed some of these were done with an iPhone. The iPhones are a wonderful way to take panoramas. We don't always stitch them together, but here certainly needs a black, and maybe the horizon line tilted, but take a look at this. It's very nice, but no, you're also the photographer who wants other people to look at it. So a little black point, make sure you have a black in there and maybe a little more saturation. I don't know how this was done, whether it was stitched together or not. I'm just looking at all of this space, and I don't know how people feel about enhancing. I don't like the word manipulation, but to take this, if you have Photoshop, and I don't look at Lightroom and Photoshop as two different softwares. They're just two different tools of the same mindset. And the handshake, but to take this into a content-aware scale and bring the horizon line down, I mean, bring the top of the frame down, you wouldn't distort any of this, and it'll look like even more of a panorama with less blue sky. Those are the tools we have. We look at this exciting panorama, especially when you're dealing with wide angle lenses. I'll talk about that in a second. The difference with using a wide angle lens and a telephoto lens when you do a panorama. Just the horizon line. You just straighten out this horizon line. This is exciting. You know, a picture like this lives on the screen, on the computer screen. However, I'm not sure if there's a real black here. And if I had to take a guess, if I rolled my mouse over the sky in Photoshop, I'd say it probably has a brightness of 80% or 70%, where it should be up to about 90%. That's the dynamic range. I can't emphasize enough to people, like, try that auto tone. It'll find a black, it'll find a white. I think I have a few examples if I get there, but it's just, see here, it's, again, it's just an exciting scene, but the dynamic range is compressed. So to hit auto tone, remember, auto tone doesn't give you the final results. It optimizes the data. Then I'm looking at these diagonal trees in the front. How easy is that to just bring a little more detail? And the detail would be done by grabbing that, lowering the contrast. It looks kind of flat. Then you bring up the texture and boom, you have all the detail in the green and to the left, while you get the sky to be, you know, doesn't have to be bright, because we know it's either early morning fog, but it's wonderful. You know, the perspectives. When I look at this, I don't know if this is cropped or somebody stitched them together and figured out how to get the repeating person out of it, but wonderful. See, this is exciting. I'm going to run back to architecture again. But just straighten it out, and it would look classical. And not that, and you can see, I can see looking at the altar and way back there, that just a slight twist to get the horizontal line, to get the horizon horizontal and the straight. And the lighting, this is a little heavy. I think the exposure is, not the exposure, the processing is a little dark. This is wonderful. I'm not sure how the clouds got so yellow. Now, if you had a yellow filter to warm it up, or you used a warming filter or whatever it was, then just select the clouds and take some of that yellow saturation out. I mean, we're right about, I don't even know how this was done. I could only assume that it was a wide angle. If it's a wide angle panorama, I mean, the person on the left holds the interest because you feel like you're peering into him. So it's a panorama with a little gusto here, you know. But how I can't imagine this would be in a stitch photograph without and having these three distinct. This is very nice, really exciting. See, this doesn't have a real black to it, and I'm not sure how much it needs it because you know you're looking through distance. But at least this front range could have been just a little darker, maybe to look like we're looking further through it. This is a wonderful capture. And I want to mention something here. Is this where I had, I'm trying to be aware of the time. How are we doing? I'm going to go back to here. Not that one. I'm going to go back to my Lightroom. I think we talked about the architecture. Listen, there's a couple of things I want to mention here about panoramas. You may be very aware of it, and I won't have time to do it, although I'm prepared to do it. When you take multiple sections like this and you put it together in photo merge, and this happened to be in Lightroom, and I'll talk about that and why. Looking at this image here, I'm going to try to find it again. This is amazing because you know when you scan from the left to the right, the light fall off. It's much brighter on one side than it is on the other, but the software itself is pretty compensating. So when you look at this photo merge here, it's so easy now because it stitches it together. It makes a balance. And I want you, everybody thinks of panning. You know, you can pan to the left for this church, then go up and do another row, then go up and do another row. And the Lightroom photo merge will stitch these 12 images together. So sometimes we think of panorama, we think of horizontal, but we can do vertical and get a nice tower and then straighten it out. I think because it's so quick, I'm going to do this. Go back to here. You're making me aware of this, so I'm checking my clock here.
Okay.
Okay, so in Lightroom, you select your images, then you pick photo merge. There's all kinds of softwares that do this, but it's built in. And if you pick the panorama, when you open it up, you have lots of choices here. And I'm going to go to the grid. I think I have these. This is pretty quick. But what Lightroom does that's very unique is when it stitches this together, it does some real intelligent stuff. It's balancing it for distortion, alignment, exposure, and you could do, it tries to pick the best, but again, you could change the distortion. But look at what happens when you fill the edge. It'll go fill it out, and you do auto settings, and now this is all done, and it makes a 16-bit file. If you use the Lightroom and you go your exposure from 0 to 5, it goes from 0 to 10. There's so much more detail. It takes the raw data and it creates a 16-bit DNG that is and you can tell it to take out any shadowing. It's just so incredibly easy. And I know there's all kinds of software, but this is pretty amazing what it does. And you know, you can change the perspectives to be cylindrical, spherical. Let me take the edge fill off here for a second. So I can't tell you the power that sits here in Lightroom, and uh,
I never knew. I would call into question the term auto settings because I've been in this dialog box a whole bunch of times and I've never clicked that thing auto settings because I didn't know exactly what it would do.
well, when you, I'll tell you what
So
auto
that's the
set.
first time I've seen that it actually balances the color. So that's
Oh yeah, yeah. And matter of fact, when you do this, I mean, this is the difference. And I have I think I have something. Oh, I think as simple as this. Look at this is a black and white that I'm going to talk about, so I won't bring this. But look at what auto does. Color, and look at when I do this. Watch the histogram. Is this final? No, I think I need a little shadow detail too. However, the auto takes the data and optimizes it, and it creates data where there was no data. It's so intelligent, and it does that. And now with the content aware fill and the generative AI, I mean, it's just really silly what happens here. So I wanted to let you aware that you can also do multiple, do a row of 4, go up, because the church was, I couldn't walk back more than 25 feet. And well, this is just magic. Contrast the skies. Look, but the smoothness of that's all algorithms. The issues we used to have when we had tripods. This is really kind of interesting to me because look at what's important to know here. If I hit the letter I, did this one show me it was a 35 millimeter lens? Where did I see that? This was kind of like a wide angle lens.
Photo details.
Is that under photo details? Thank you. Okay, so this is a 26 millimeter lens. So when you pan and stitch it together, you have this perspective distortion. By the way, you could try this in Lightroom 3 different ways, and it'll give you 3 different renditions. But this is dramatic where, let's see, I think I can go here. Or what's the next one I want? Oh, I want to go back here. So when you do wide angle, I'm going to hit an X. And look at this is the one of Oakland. See how flat this is? But look at it's a 155 millimeter lens. So if you're standing in front of something, you could use your wide angle and take 3 images and stitch them together. Or you could take a telephoto, do a vertical, and take 10, 12, 15 sections. And then when you stitch it together, it's perspective. It'll be flat as a canvas because you're just taking a small angles of view. So I saw these 2, they were almost back to back. And I think I can do that one. That's an exciting one I want to show. But okay, so look at the penguins. And look at Oakland. Just you could be in the same place, just move your zoom in and out and try it again, or change your lenses, and pretty exciting. Again, this is wonderful because it's just a scene, but boy, this person sitting to the left gives it a very interesting perspective. I want to say double whammy in a good way. It's so surreal because it's a wonderful wide angle. There's a tilt of the sky, and it's infrared. And again, this is about the 3rd image we've seen where we have the subject, an integral part to help the viewer look in. This is a very exciting photo. Yeah, it's a great time of night to shoot, huh? And catching that light. Sometimes you may have to raise shadows a little bit here, but this is the multicolor is exciting. I don't know who took this one. There's the name up here. However, I I want to say this must be a crop, or you put the fireworks later, because how do you take 5 exposures across 4 seconds and get these places? But it's an exciting photograph. Very nice. You know, the curvature here works. I wouldn't take the curvature out of this. You probably could with a lot of work, and maybe, or a press of a button. Sometimes that happens. But I can't deal with the lack of a level horizon here. If it was a level horizon, I think you would feel that more. Maybe you like the traveling away and into the future. But I would suggest that sometimes you try that transform in Lightroom and do the horizontal and vertical or distortion and bend it.
That image reminded me a little bit of the penguins. Notice the focal length. And if you've got a strong central point there, and in the penguins, you know, they kind of went out into the mountains or down to the coastline. Here, I think I agree with you. I think it's a really effective, you know, visual.
Yeah. But you see how Kevin that there's just bulge. There's a wonderful feeling of this bulging out because of the wide angle lens would be so much easier for the viewer to see if it was horizontally aligned. You know, like
for sure.
Yeah. And that's an awareness. I mean, it's so easy to let it slide because, wow, that's great. Yes, I know. We know that it's great, and it can be greater with just the littlest, and it's a win. And hopefully that's what people will see. Bravo. I don't know how you got this motion in the sky. I don't know if I don't think it could be. It could be the Northern Lights. Does this movement, a slow shutter speed? What do we have here? 160th of a second. I don't know how the movement came here, but the shadowing, the detail, the black, the light and holding. This is bravo. Here again, I think it doesn't show us the focal length here, but I tend to be, it may be a little wide. Sometimes this happens. It's a little more drama here. See, with the intent, I had a note way up front. It just came out now when I say the intent. What's your intent? What is the intent here? Oh, this moonrise, this moonset, whatever it was. And I've been using this line for about 30 years, 40 years in my talks. If you're really good at being subtle, nobody will know. To grab this sky with the sky mask in Lightroom and increase the saturation and maybe take a curve and punch it and take the high end down or the exposure, because if your intent was you should have been sitting here with the sun, warm light illuminating this foreground while the cold blue, and you were there, you saw it, you recorded it. You may not be helping me see it. And I'm not saying you did or you didn't. I'm saying you'll know. What was your intent? My intent was just that. You could take the sky down almost to stop and maybe even warming up the foreground if I had to say, do you feel it? Do you feel it? And that comes with questioning your intent. Sometimes it's before you shoot it. Sometimes, again, just think about post-visualization. Magic of digital. This is nice. The long road rippling in there. Wonderful scene, quiet scene. I need some help with the processing to make it a little more dramatic. Not sure how. I don't know. At a 1250th of a second, I can only think that this was a 40 megapixel file, maybe more, but cropped, because how else do you get this panorama feeling and so on? This is, again, look at, when it says a 4.2, you probably know it was shot with an iPhone somewhere, 4.2 millimeter lens. again, in the center, look at the action on the right-hand side and the purple flowers, and then chop off a little to the left here. So the path is a little to the left, make it a little more exciting, and a vignette to help. And with the vignette, let's just say the path wasn't in the middle. We cut off 30% or 20% of the left. When you're doing the vignette, remember in Lightroom, you create the vignette, you can grab the center point and move it to where you want it. Don't use the vignette crop because it only is at the edge. Use the vignette, the radial, and shape the radial. Nice panorama. I think the color here is wonderful. I boost the saturation, and this is really nice and exciting. Let me go over here to. I already showed you that. Well, I think I'm going to show you this one more because it's very easy. This was what was submitted. And I'm making, oh, wait a minute, that's in black and white. I'll get to that in a second. Okay, so just remember one more thing here. Well, I guess I showed you that. Let's go here. And I'm going to go into macro. And other than the exciting part of the macro, I'm bringing this up because macro can be seductive. We're looking at this, a new world, that new view, you know, a new perspective, because not a lot of people see it. But just don't forget the rest of the craft and creativity here. I'm going to show you, let's go right into the macro here. Should be able to get to the macro on escape. I think he's going to go a little faster. I just hard to say. I mean, these are just so magic. I want to scan. I have notes. Just scan through these before I go into a few of them.
Oh, some of these are ridiculous.
Oh, just ridiculous, just ridiculous. I mean, the sharpness here, and when we're looking at this, I'm looking at a 100th of a second. That's not even a lot, but just these are just magic, guys. One of the things you look at here, it's flat, huh? We're on one plane. One plane is, thank you very much, because when you're not on one plane, something's got to be sharp. Yeah. Something has to be sharp. Now, whether you go into stacking, because you can take multiple exposures and stack them together, or if I looked at this and I think how wonderful this is, the colors are soft, the image is soft. I think, is that the pistol? Is that what they call this area right in the center here? Boy, I'd take this into Topaz and see what I could pull out of this. And just, I need something sharp. So this wonderful, well, look, I want to say it's an observation. This is tough. You get to see this and go in and work for this, Gary. It's a magic shot. But again, something needs to be sharp, and they have stacking software. And I just want to show you, you may or may not be aware of this. With Lightroom, with Photoshop, okay, so you have the bundle. Take a look at this. And I focused on the thermometer. Wrong way. I focused on the camera, my old Leica, and I focused on the remote. And Photoshop, you can do this. Matter of fact, no, I'm not going to open up. It's so easy. Your camera moves, it doesn't matter. You say align photos, you select all the layers that aligns it, and then you say blend, and it takes the sharpest part of each image. So when you're doing something like when you're doing some of the macros, sometimes if things are steady enough, that you are still enough, that you can go back and focus one place, focus another place, focus, keep going in and in and in, and then stack them together. If you have Lightroom, you have Photoshop. If you look up stack focus in Photoshop, you won't believe that this will take you, depending on the speed of your computer, from 30 seconds to a minute and a half, and it'll stitch it all together. I want to address one thing on macro, and I'll look a little more of your pictures. I think we talked here. Let me go here. And just the definition. You know, macro photography. I mean, if you look at a skyline of Oakland, well, that's not macro photography, but we take it all and put it on our little sensor. But really, macro photography is about a 10-inch subject into life size, 1:1. And the term micro is 1:1 and greater. So when we look at this macro close-up photography that we're looking at here, we're crossing the both borders from macro to micro. And what's interesting is they have specific lens for this. So when the macro lenses, they will focus from infinity to what most of them will do 1:1. So you can use them as a normal lens and move 1:1. And here's an important thing for you people who are working close up in flowers. If you have close-up rings or extension tubes, I'm not sure who uses those anymore because of the magic of the interesting part here is they have a 35mm macro and a 100mm macro. So what the hell's the difference if I get 1:1? Well, there's two things. The working distance. When you go to life size 1:1, the distance depends on your focal length, which means, I'll show the graph down the bottom. When you get 1:1 with a 35mm lens, you know, you got that lens in so close to the subject that you probably have shadows from the lens. The same 100mm macro will give you a larger working distance. So therefore, it's easier to light. That's why they call them medical. Dentists use them a lot because they're not sticking the camera inside the incision. You know, they can. So the working distance is important if you want to not shadow your subject. And again, those macro lenses, as well as remember the perspective of the penguins and Oakland, the further back you get, there is less distortion. Oh, let me get back here. There's less distortion in your photos if you can back up. So again, backing up with a 100mm lens and focusing on the flower, or walking in with a 30mm lens or a 24mm lens, you can still fill the frame, but the shape is very, very different. So you can get this nice, this could be very flat, and look at it, it's a 105mm lens. And you can start, this is just one, this is one, you know, this is really interesting. This, Gary, is almost as soft as this one. I'm having trouble living with this one, but this right hand pedal is sharp enough for me. The pastels is just beautiful. This is tremendous. This looks like, does it say which camera this looks like? The 4.3mm lens, Panasonic. Oh, I'm looking at the focal length of the lens because the depth of field or the area of focus. Now, this is to me a classic because you want to stop because it's such a magical photo, but don't stop there. If you took your whole exposure down a little, or saturation, to really make this purple, because it's a complement to the orange insect, I would take the exposure and the saturation. I don't care where the insect is. If it's too dark or the wrong, it doesn't matter, because I will select just the insect in a mask. And I'll try some texture or some sharpening on it, and certainly a little saturation, because you've got this wonderful capture and you have this wonderful contrasting colors. Look at, to talk about contrasting colors and composition is almost silly with the moment, because the moment, when you look at that Venn diagram, that's there. But with very little processing, because we're photographer processors, this would just be insane. This is a great photograph. This to me is wonderful. I don't know what I think of the bright green in the upper left-hand side. I may select it and desaturate it, and I would take this into Topaz and select the photo AI and see how sharp I could get the center of this flower. This is exciting. Nice work. This is really nice work. God bless you. When I see nature photographers, besides having to come in with a vision, the ability to see, the technical aspect of wildlife photography is to be, it's kind of like wedding photographers too. I don't know. I used to think not much of wedding photographers, but when you think of the moment to capture, you don't have, you've got to be very, very good and technical. And this is, you've got to be technical and you've got to be knowledgeable, and we saw that one. Just silly. This is just beautiful. Again, working with the flat planes and stuff like that, this is somewhat easier to get into focus. These are really, really exciting. You see how the nostrils are soft, and it doesn't matter. The eye is sharp. Oh, I love the softness of the colors and the fading off. This is pretty magical. Okay. Oh, I didn't want to go to that one. I'm going to go to here. What did I do? I was going onto the focus. Hey guys, I'm going to go down a little path here with the black and white. Let me get here and click on the black and white. And I made a note, and I think we've got maybe like it's 12 minutes. I don't have a lot of notes on this because everything we were talking about works for black and white. But I have listen, we're not going to forget about this whole concept of the Venn diagram and J. Mizell, color, lighting, gesture, lighting. Color will be tones of gray, but I have a question here. It says, we're always wondering what the intent is. Why are you shooting black and white? Why? Because it's cheaper than color film? Easier to process in your darkroom? Well, none of that works anymore today. I mean, the challenge in black and white is to come up with this dynamic range to, the blacks to white, the contrast in the scenes. I don't care if they're flat because they're fog or they're high key, but it's not just black and white. So the question is, why are we doing black and white? And sometimes when it's graphic or it's simplicity. Now here again, when I look at this, it's wonderful. The tonality works for me, the black and white works for me. The background is confusing in a way. Not that it's black and white, but it's too defined. And if I had to think about black and white, because graphics, people say, oh, you have a nice graphic, strong graphics in the photograph, black and white works. Well, it does. Exposure, composition, that's always a need. Once you start seeing these tools, I look at this tool, I look at this and I think of the new Lightroom lens blur. This is so smart. It will define that background. It will, and you have a slider bar to say, I want it softer, softer, softer. You have a bokeh selection that you can change the highlights as they get softer. You can go ahead and mask and say select subject or select background, whatever you want. But you want to grab that background and take the contrast down, maybe the bright point down now that it's softer. This photo is a screamer. It's wonderful. So the simplicity, the focus on her fingers, it's just there. Got to help the viewer. See how the background here helps her stand out? So that really works. I'm going to leave it to the photographer here, whether they like that high key lighting on the left. I don't know, it's so easy enough to tone it down to make it balance on with the right side. Or do I want to get the right side and take it down and make it more mysterious? What's your intent? The fact that it's black and white, to me, simplifies a lot of things. We're not just shooting black and white because I just have a new darkroom I'm going in there later on and shooting. No, it's a purpose and it's a simplicity, but it's still the challenge for the photographer processor. Again, we have the moment, we have the shadow. And I don't even think about the composition if you want to extend the stairs with generative AI. Again, it's flat, it needs a black point, a white point. And again, I would help it with focus. I can't believe how much I use that lens blur in Lightroom. It's very nice. I think, you know how easy it is to get inside this building, this hut, take that door, make a rectangle, and show me the detail that's inside there. Maybe even, I don't know if it'll work, to straighten out the lines of the arch and the vignette. This is nice. I think I would work on the face of that structure to get more of the ribbing for the contrast, very easy with texture, and then lighten it up. So again, as I said way in the beginning, as I wrap this up now, looking at these images, I don't think any of you photographers out there had a problem seeing, because these are wonderful observations. Wonderful observations. But now you've got to present it to me. You've got to present it to the viewers who go up to SlickPic. Now, tough exposure with a bright sky, dark foreground, but to grab all of these birds all the way down, this whole right triangle, if you want to write this down, I know what it's going to look like. You select this with object, with a brush. If you have Lightroom, I think most of the profiles, I talked with Sam about this, but I think a lot of people are dealing with Lightroom. You select this object, and you want to get detail out of this, raise the exposure, maybe, but you take that contrast and take it all the way down to the left. No contrast at all. You're going to see detail, and it's going to be flat as hell, but you're going to see detail. And then you get this texture. It's in my books on frequency. Frequency, and when you look at that texture, clarity, dehaze, they go up and up and up. In other words, when it's real fine texture, like a screen door, versus maybe a simple curve on a street, maybe clarity will work better because there's only a few lines. There's not a, but you would bring this whole thing up here and get detail. And if I took it all up and say, that's great, but I'm seeing detail in the birds, I love when they were silhouette, then you erase them. This is a great moment, a great capture. And it's just a few steps away from being a great photograph. It's wonderful. Again, a moment. This must be two stops underexposed. And let me go back to tell you about output. If you love this and you want to put this on SlickPic, and then someone says, this is great, you want to hang it in your office, you're going to put this in your house, well, then you're going to have to process it again differently. Because when you get this dark shadow tones, zone 2, 3, 4, they live on the screen. Remember, our computer screens, when you make prints, if they end up to be too dark, your screen may be too bright. Most computer screens are much brighter than photographers need, so their adjustments tend to come down. So if you're running into dark prints, that's probably because your monitor is too light. I won't even venture a guess what happened to this cat, but this is, oh, maybe it's a sculpture or a statue. A lot of white space, a lot of lack of detail here. One of the challenges of black and white is getting that tonality, and you want to be using, I want to say curves, but selective masking. Something like this needs 3 or 4 masks to balance the exposure. Just magic, which is great eye. I have this one. Again, the symmetry, it's all contrast. Bring this white point up. And I don't know how many people use snapshots in Lightroom, but you want to use snapshots because you take that contrast up, you take that white point up, and you save the snapshot. Then you go to the curve tone and change it from linear to strong and make a snapshot. And then you go from one snapshot to the other, to the other, to the other, and you say somewhere in the middle. Your job isn't over because you made this wonderful capture. You laid this out. This is just a terrific, what do you say about this, huh? It's just, this is, someone had a vision. And the backwards 20. It's just magic. Classic. But look at this wonderful bird here. It's too dark. Select this bird. So here you do an auto tone, stretches out your data, then you start adjusting. This bird could be brought up. It's a wonderful capture, wonderful capture. I love the moment. The nice warm color, the sepia here. It really works. I want you to look, and don't forget, you're on a different, everybody who's attending is on a different screen. Now, I went to a presentation last night of my friend, a birder, and there was like 75 people in front of the screen. Everybody's looking at the same screen. You know, they opened up the kitchen door, the light comes in, the screen loses contrast. They close the door. Now, you're all looking at different screens. The only way you're going to know this is by checking the black point in your software. You want a black point unless you have, again, a wonderful composition, a wonderful perspective. This is a stop dark, whatever it be. I have one more series of photos that would look at. I have to mention this because it's about exposure here. And on my book on exposure, I have the optimum, I talk about the optimum exposure. I tell you what it is. I mean, everybody says exposed to the right, exposed to the right. I'm winding down now, guys. You know, again, to understand exposure here, the optimum exposure, it's one sentence, it's over. The optimum exposure is placing the brightest part of your scene at 99% brightness in your software. And if it is a black cat, it's going to, and the examples are in the book, and I tell you how to do this. The black cat will be to the right side of the histogram, and it'll look like chalk. But when you put your slider down, you take your exposure slider, listen to this, another major, If you take your exposure slider to the left, you know you have an optimum or you have a near optimum exposure. If we expose to the right, we should use our software to expose to the left. If you find your exposure slider in your software going to plus values, oh, you missed the exposure big time. So it's in the book, but it's important when we deal with black and white. Matter of fact, I even mentioned in the book is I have two procedures, a method 1 and method 2, how to get the optimum exposure. But follow this when we're talking about black and white. When we do exposure, when we used to do negatives, we would expose for the shadow and develop for the highlights. It's allowance. This is the zone. You expose for the shadows, and the longer you left it in the developer, the more dense the negative would get. You expose for the shadow, but it's not just negative film, it's negative media. I don't know any other negative media than film, but if you have negative film, then you have a negative paper. But that's not where we live. We live with positives. We live with digital. And the concept with exposure is exposed to the right, exposed for the highlights, and you develop for the shadows. This gives you the most data in your capture for you to work processing. Again, this is the classic exposure to the right, ETPR. That's what you want to do. Now, where it fits here is, when you do your black and white, I think the optimum exposure is even more critical. And don't change, if you go into Photoshop, however you do it, and say, take my RGB and turn it into grayscale. No grayscale. You want to go into, you use your RGB color because you have more options to change. You can change the blues, you can change the greens, you can change, it's pretty amazing. So we're always going to take our original capture, obviously in color. Don't ever get rid of the color other than with sliders, because that information is available to you. I'm not going to go through the whole process here, but if you look at this image, this is just desaturating it. This is, look at the saturation slider all the way to the left. This is selecting the black and white monochrome. And if you select the black and white monochrome, there is an auto button here. And this auto button is image sensitive. It'll try to see the reds, the greens, the blues, and it'll try to make those adjustments. So if this is black and white, this is black and white in, that's black and white, and this is just hitting the auto button. And I don't know if anybody's Jack Davis has seen any classes by Jack Davis. This was the best. This here is manual. And the thing with the manual is, watch this. You want to try this when you take your black and white. You can try auto, and I try them both to see what I like the best. And whichever one's is closest, then start moving these individual ones. And these will be different for each scene, because this is all based on color data. And matter of fact, when you're doing this, and you can see the aqua is doing nothing. I think the blue, I should have some big things on the sky here. But you see, it's looking at all the blues. And this is only the starting point. Then you look at this, and this little pad tool says, what would happen if I took this color, whatever the color it is, and it knows it because it's looking underneath that. So everything is predicated on color, optimum exposure, then saturation. Here's a black and white, here's a black and white auto, here's a black and white manual. And that doesn't stop you from saying, okay, let me go ahead and select the sky because on my sky, this is the mask. And as you can see, I could change the highlights of the sky and maybe even select the barn. And because we have color data in here, I can take my color sliders and change this. So looking at some of these, I think I showed you that. Just be aware if you want to get your color here. I'm going to go through about 3 or 4 more of these, and I think I'm going to be out of here. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to hit escape.
I think you just changed my black and white editing workflow in 3. Thank you.
Jack Davis is my jaw dropped. However,
That's great.
think of the zone system. When we used a red filter to get the sky so we could darken the sky, are you kidding me? I have Lightroom. I click on the sky. And now I get the sky. And so I didn't use the red filter, but I can use the red filter now. These are just some magic. I saw this one here. Now take a look at this one and this one. These I think they're the same photographer, pretty sure. Again, a nice black point, a nice white. Now remember, if you take an exposure that's not optimal and it's dark, you can use your exposure slider and bring it to the right, and everything is magic. God, I have Lightroom. I can miss my exposure by 2 stops, and I bring it all back. No, you bring it back. You don't bring it all back. It'd be much better if you had it white and brought it down, because what happens is the horns, instead of being 12 shades of gray, may be 200 shades of gray, and it's not beyond. It's not extreme to take the masking tool, the object, and say, find me this horn, and then change the adjustment and change the texture to make it snap and say, well, that's working there. Let me paint on the other side. Because you're only dealing with shades. If they're the same brightness and they were color, you'd have separation. But it's more of a challenge with black and white. Great photograph. I love the fog in the back. Well, it just needs to be a little brighter, but it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Again, I think I showed you this. This is serene, wonderful observation, pretty underexposed. And right here, it's very dramatic. But this could be partially because you're dealing with bright screens. Again, find your white point, find your black point. Exciting reflection. I love this one. I'm not quite sure if it's a composite or if it's a long, is it a long exposure? What do we have? We don't have it up here. Well, guys, I think, saw this one. See how someone selected the sky? Look at the highlights in the sky on the trees. Sometimes if you know where this happens, when you don't choose black and white, but you use one of those black and white modes that says antique or something like that, and you could really lose edges quite a bit. You can see the over sharpen here. I don't know. You're looking at this. Someone, Peggy's Cove. I don't know if everybody's been to Peggy's Cove. I'm not sure there's a black here. I think there could be more contrast in the rocks and the woman or the man standing by the rocks.
So I do notice that they're called infrared photo process.
Oh, well,
the infrared impact your statements about it?
No, I taking the infrared filter out to shoot infrared. It's so subject dependent, right? I mean, you need to have an awful lot of infrared light. I can tell you this, Kevin, it's like, I never seen a gray whiteout or a lighthouse. It's just, there's got to be some black here. And If you're using the infrared to capture a different relationship, because that's what's actually happening. You know, it's interesting. I don't know how many people know, but film is inherently sensitive to blue light, silver halide. It's blue light. Then someone figured out, well, I can use a red light in the darkroom because the film doesn't see it. But then they had panchromatic film, and they extended the sensitivity to the red. That's my Polaroid background. Film is inherently sensitive to blue. Digital senses, it's the other end of the spectrum. They're inherently sensitive to infrared. So it's disproportionate. That's why they use infrared filters. So if you take the infrared filter off, what's happening? Sometimes it's dramatic when you have green foliage, because green is the other end of the spectrum. But what it does is it separates the ones and zeros because it takes a whole different. But looking at this picture still needs a black, and this picture needs a lighthouse. I guess you can convince me that the clouds don't need to be as white, but somewhere along the line, the little house here being flat gray, but it's a great composition. It feels so good. Magic, black and white. I'll tell you, maybe this works, maybe it doesn't. It's going to be hard to get a print out of this, but if you were to make a print, I could live with everything being dark like that. Try to select a couple and bring some detail. Here is, in my book, I call it friendly pairs. You take the contrast down, that slider, and you take the texture up. What you're doing is opening up more detail with the lack of contrast. And when you use the texture slider or the clarity, depending on the texture, then you bring the edge sharpness, because that's what clarity and texture does. It looks for the edges and how many pixels out. But you see that the three black cement, that's wonderful. I don't need detail there. I'd like to see a little in there. This is wonderful capture. Maybe interesting if we grab the Louvre, the triangle, and we brought those pictures up a little lighter than the sky. And a little vignette holding the sky, and this may make that. Well, very interesting here. The fact that we have colored leaves in a window here and maybe bluish panes, it works for me. I may even just accentuate that a little more, then make sure everything else is neutral. Can you see? Oh, this is a classic. This is a classic. Jay Mizell. You're responsible for everything in the picture. That color bricks or paneling on the right, it can't be there. It can't be there. You either fill it in or crop it out. Those are the kind of things. But we get, sometimes we just look into we're excited about the picture and we take it. Like I say, the photography of these four subjects are just magic. You guys have a great eye, and hopefully I brought some kind of awareness to it. I want to let me do this. Make sure I'm on. Get this off. One of the best ways to improve your photography is, I think, what you're doing. You submit this, you sit through these very exciting or boring lectures, whatever, whatever comes out the other end, but you're getting involved. You're going to be more aware when you start looking at these pictures, whether I brought the awareness, you listen to someone else, you watch the video, you're just on the right track. my books, you can get onto my site. It's www.bob.dinatale. I 2 books. I sell them as a bundle if you want. These are not software or camera specific. They are really conceptual. You can www.bob.dinatale. I do one-on-one training by the hour. First time we do like 3 hours for $225 for the first time, but it's your content. You say, Bob, I need some time. I need to know X, Y, and Z. I use this software. Although I know Adobe, and it's just very good. And you want to go to, if you want, I have these monthly forums. I'm not going to have one in May because I'm traveling, but probably in June, we talk about the craziest of things, but a lot of this awareness, I call it the Bob train. I start with a few topics. You send in your pictures, I process your pictures, and I don't know if anybody knows the word chiaroscuro or fumato, Michelangelo, shadows and highlights, and those are sliders in Lightroom 200 years later, 300 years later. I mean, we're doing the same thing that he did, and now we have a slider to drop the shadow detail on our razor. So it's really kind of interesting. My address is, I don't know, do we send out my address email at bobdinatale.com? But I don't know, Kevin, how do we still have people out there?
Yeah, there's a few people on, but
Okay.
I did just want to first of all relieve you of your MC duty there or your lecture. But this was an absolute tour de force. I mean, I see the intellect, the experience, the authorship, and the creativity coming through in your reviews. Won't call them critiques, but we've done quite a number of these, and I think this was among the more in depth. And I use that in only the highest of praise. I learned things across the entire spectrum of digital photography during the last couple of hours than I have thought about in a long time.
Did you say couple of hours?
Yeah.
Don't scare me. Really? Oh, time passes when you're having fun.
It does.
When you're talking to yourself.
But no, I think again, having your practiced eye take a look at these things and see what catches your intellect and your experience, and then being able to reflect on those, time back to the books that you've written and the background has just been a real treat for us. So
well, Kevin, you've done a lot of these, right? And this one here, I hope maybe some people either they take away specific things or an awareness, but I'm better than I was 2 hours ago because you can't help but see other people's eyes and think about it and discuss it. So you see this, you see that. So now what? No. Now what is up to you? Not my job, So I thank you and Sam because I'm a better photographer now than I was 2 hours ago.
Well, I'm fortunate enough that a couple of the images that you centered on were mine. And I wrote processing notes, and you will see new versions of those images in the next day or so.
Okay, well, do those snapshots, and I'll tell you, and you can send them to me. My email address. But anybody else, if they can contact me through you or email at Bob DiNatale, or go to my site. And
that's great.
But thank you so much, and thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. That was incredible. Thank you.
If you could just stick around for a moment, I'd like to show you something. Guys, thanks so much for attending the 52-week challenge review for the month of April, and really appreciate your being around.